Hello?
Okay.
The town to respect. Oh,
Can you hear me?
we can. You'll just need to mute for a couple minutes here, Mr. Risvold.
Okay, thanks. Just don't think you're in camera because I'm hearing everything.
Perfect. The town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on Treaty 6 territory and Métis Nation Region Number 4. These are the traditional territories and ancestral lands of the Indigenous peoples, including the Plains Cree First Nations, Assiniboine, Winnemucca, Rocky Mountain First Nations, Stoney, Tsuut'ina, Nakota, Denessalen, Saulteaux, Mountain Métis, Michif, and many other communities that continue to enrich the land on which the town of Hinton was established. With this sentiment, I'll call the meeting to order. Council or administration, any additions or changes to tonight's agenda? Mayor Mike, you had indicated via email that there might be something you wanted to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the discretion, I guess, of council, I was going to bring it up in urgent matters, but if council has appetite to prefer under a discussion item, I can do that also.
I think if you're hoping to make a motion or a direction, I think probably better as an agenda item, and I'd be fine with that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to add a discussion item, the Showmobile donation request.
Council, any opposition to that being at the agenda? Administration, have anything to add or change tonight?
Nothing from administration.
Something else to add? Councilor Magoon?
I'd like to move that we adopt the standing committee meeting agenda for September 14th, 2021 as amended.
Perfect, thank you, Councilor Magoon. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. That takes us to the citizens on the council. Ms. Rendell, anybody coming tonight?
We have nobody.
Perfect. That takes us to our delegations and presentations. So first up is the Hinton Historical Society. So Ross Risvold and Madison Sharman. I will turn it over to you. You'll just have to unmute now, Mr. Risvold.
You muted me, didn't you? All right, we'll continue on. So I have to ask, do you mute me whenever you don't like what I'm going to say? All right. So Madison Sharman is here with me. She's the manager of the Historical Society in the museum. And I consider this to be actually a very important presentation, and it's more than just one out of interest. And that is that one of the actions we're going to be requesting town is to reestablish funding up to the $85,000 limit. If this doesn't occur, we seriously have to determine what we're going to be doing, because we won't have the finances to continue on. So thank you for the opportunity to meet. And you have the presentation in front of you? You do. Okay, thank you, Ryan. So the issue is the funding, and council to determine if it wants to continue to support history and culture within the community. Both the strategic plan and the sustainability plan indicate that both history and culture are important in the community. We won't have history if we don't get sustainable funding. So some of the background is that initially the museum got funding of $90,000. We had previously requested $85,000. This year we received $65,000. And that is not sustainable for us. This next slide is municipal funding through the region. In Edson, the Galloway Station Museum is owned by the town. Edson, as you know, is around 8,500 people. The town's funding there is $175,000. Because the town owns the building in Edson, and because there's a large population around Edson, Yellowhead County also provides the museum with an additional $75,000. So Right now, we're up to 250,000. And it's interesting to note that the town of Edson pays for all of the maintenance in the building, utilities, water, sewer, insurance, etc. And for us, that would come to about over $1,000 a month. For them, it would be more because of the building is larger. So Edson pays a substantially more amount of money for the museum. The Triple Park Museum in Evansburg, community of 800 people. The county provides it with $85,000 in funding. Plus, it also pays all the expenses for the operation of the museum. The Jasper Museum, population 4,500. They get $65,000 from the town, $15,000 from parks, and then there's an individual in the town that provides in excess of around $60,000. The Northern Rockies Museum, which is ours in the town, we're 10,000 plus people, and we received $10,000 from the town. A distinguishing difference is the Hinton Museum pays for the insurance, water, sewer, building costs to operate it, keep it clean, whereas in Edson, the town actually goes in and cleans the building, and that's their expense. So not only is Edson, Temple Park, etc., funded on a higher basis, Edson much higher, they also received additional help through all of the maintenance costs. It's also interesting to note on the next slide that Hinton and Maddie would have to speak to this if you have questions for her after the presentation. The Hinton Museum provides more services and programming than any of the other museums in the region. Now, income reductions for us in Hinton, because of COVID, we've had a reduction of around $20,000. Bingo and poll tickets no longer available to us, and it used to be that was $50,000. Tours, because of COVID, a loss in revenue of around $5,000. Now, if we look at our museum cutbacks because of COVID, I think that we've been very pragmatic. We've reduced staff to one full-time person. Edson, you might want to note, has got, I think, Maddie, 3. We've eliminated summer staff. We did qualify for summer staff, but we didn't have the funds to be able to take advantage of the grants that were available because you need some matching funds. We stopped hosting free community events. And of course, eliminated any staff training and professional development. So the actions requested is that we're requesting the town to provide bridge funding of $10,000 additional dollars this year to support the Northern Rockies Museum until the next funding allocation, which would mean in the next budget. This then would bring it up to the original ask. We asked for 85, we got 65. We did receive, and we thank you for that, 10,000 from the community grant, but we were still $10,000 short. Now, we usually receive funding, if it's approved in budget, in March or April, and this will take us to that funding cycle. If we don't receive it, then some hard decisions on the viability of the society, the museum, is going to have to be discussed. So well, I'll skip the next point because I made it. We would also ask that the town work diligently with Yellowhead County so that we could receive funding similar to what the model for the Galloway Museum in Edson. Remember that their funding, they received substantial funding from the county of $75,000. Because we receive 65, we would only then get $6,500 from the county. If we got 85,000, we would get 8,500. So we would ask that you approach the county and have administration work closely with them so that they would provide funding under a similar model or an improved model. Because a lot of the museum interpretation is in the county area. So bottom line is right now, if council thinks that history and culture are important to the community, as stated in the strategic plan and sustainability plan, you're getting an excellent deal. And it's much, much cheaper than the other municipalities around us. And also because we're not for profit, I would suggest we're operating in a very frugal way. Meaning if the town was running it, it would cost a whole lot more. It also provides sense of community. When the Voyageur Club came to the museum and said they would like to put up that large canoe that was used for, I think it was the 150th celebration of national parks. It was easy for us to say yes, as long as they pay for it. So they had to pay for the structure, putting it up, all of that. It was easy for us to work with them quickly because and they did so, and they got a lot of volunteer work. They got lumber for nothing when it was sky high. And it provides the community with sense of community. And if we want to sustain it ourselves in Hinton, sense of community is one of the most important things when research or from research on the sustainability of communities. So we would also then request that staff, if you approve, we would like you to request staff to come back to council with a solution on how you could provide this bridge funding of $10,000 this year. And then hopefully we can have it reestablished up to $85,000 in the budget for future years. I know you're not all going to be there for future years, but you can still indicate it in the planning with the budgets, and the administration can carry those desires forward. So that's it. And if you have any questions, we'd be delighted to answer them.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Rizzo. Council, do you have any clarifying questions? Councilor Haas has hand up earlier.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Risvold and Maddie, for coming today. I got actually a few questions. I'm going to start off with, you mentioned in comparison to the other museums, and you indicated that the town of Edson owns their museum. They own the building, which I guess reason for more is they then are responsible for the operational costs, as you mentioned, of the museum. I'm curious, to your knowledge, is Entwistle's and Jasper's also owned by the municipality, or are they designed similar to yours, where they're in the community and there's a board, or what? Are you familiar with their setup?
Okay, Evansburg is owned by the county in Madison.
That building is owned.
Go ahead, Maddie.
Oops. Okay, sorry. So Jasper is owned by the Historical Society in Jasper. Evansburg is owned and operated by the county. The Historical Society makes the day-to-day decisions, though.
Is the county one in Edson also, the county is responsible for the operational costs as well, that they own the building, or is that under the society?
Sorry, in Evansburg?
Yeah, sorry, in Evansburg, pardon me.
Okay, yeah, so they look after like the mowing, general maintenance. That's the county that's doing that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Reyes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in conversation with the county, what have they said to you in regards to lack of funding? You know, why they are not funding?
Okay,
So-
my discussion with them is that because the town doesn't own the building, we don't automatically fall under that model of, the cooperation agreement that you have when the town owns the building. Now, your administration, though I know has been talking with the county, and they would have some more information on what the county said. They're apparently coming up with a different kind of model. So I'm going to turn it over to your administration.
And so also, if you have anything to add, if not, we can always make a direction to bring information back later as well if you're not prepared.
Sure, Ms. Way is online and has been doing work directly with this group, and she will be able to answer some of those questions for you.
Thank you, Acting CEO Howarth. Before I get going, I got a new microphone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Yeah, so we did reach out to the county previously, and they had they were in transition with their community services director. However, they did advise me that that policy, which states that the building must be owned by the municipality in order to be funded by the county, was under review. The issue that kind of the town expressed to them with respect to that is there have been some changes within the MGA that require that transfer of assets are done at market value. So gone are the days where we could, purchase it for $1 and take that on. They recognize that. They also recognize that, like Mr. Risvold had pointed out, that a large portion of our history does occur or is actioned through the county area. So yes, those conversations have begun. However, of course, we cannot put all our eggs in the basket just waiting for the county to perhaps change their policy. In the museum item with respect to the agreement that would be coming to you, I believe that's next week, there are some details within that document that would kind of move us through a process after 22 or through 22 into 23 with respect to this. However, at this point, the county is not able to assist us with funding for 2021.
Thank you, Ms. Way. Councillor Reyes?
I would like to ask then, and I'm maybe speaking out of turn, and Heather certainly would have a better idea, but to pull the string on the politicians in Hinton, mayor and council, to put some pressure on the county to say, look, you can still come up with funding out of your budget the same, and it doesn't have to be through the agreement, but you can say, okay, we're going to fund you as if you do own the building. And I think if administration to administration can't convince the county to do that, and that's no reflection at all on administration, because I know Heather's been great and working hard with us and with the county and try to get this through. But then it's time to pull in the politics and start putting pressure on the politicians in the county, starting with the regional one and mayor on mayor.
I think we got a couple different horizons. So the immediate request for 10,000, 85 for 2022, and then beyond that with the partnership request coming back from administration. So a couple different things on the horizon. Councillor Reyes, are you all set?
I'm good.
Councillor Haas?
Yeah, I guess, and that just to clarify, and this is, I guess, to administration. So we've gone down the road of the civic agency policy with the Historical Society to go through that process, and that's coming back to us. Is that what I understand? CEO Wilson?
Yeah, I'll let Ms. Way.
Thank you, CEO Howarth. Yes, that's correct. So they have gone through the civic agency process. They are part of the proposed partnership report that is forthcoming, which details the areas in which council may fund or adjust funding and programming, perhaps even things like Mr. Risvold has mentioned related to mowing or utilities, and those kinds of things can all be addressed through an agreement. However, as Councillor Nelson stated this evening, largely it is to do with the bridge funding to carry this group through to 2022 in the amount of, I believe it was 10,000. Yes, they will be coming as part of the civic agencies for 2022 funding.
Okay, thank you. Council, any other questions for clarification? Councillor Stashik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if there was any breakdown on the funding that the Galloway Station Museum receives. Reason being, there are several organizations and services that are offered out of that building centrally. Hinton has a lot of those same services and organizations, but they're split amongst different localities and areas in our community. So just for the ability to compare apples to apples, I was wondering if you had a breakdown between like the archives and the tourist information center that's in the Galloway Station Museum building. I believe the Chamber of Commerce is there too, along with some other organizations.
So the chamber is not included in that amount. It is only to run the museum, archives, and visitor center. So I believe it's about 10,000, maybe up to 15,000 for the visitor center, but the money now for the archives is all just one lump sum included in with the museum. When they transferred it over from the library to the Galloway, it's now just one lump sum. They don't break it out anymore. So I couldn't tell you exactly how much that is. But other than that, we don't have an archives and we don't have the visitor center, but we provide all the other services that they would. And those are the only other oddball services that they have that we don't have. So.
Thank you. Councilor McGoon?
Yeah, thanks. I think this is going to be a question for Maddie. Maddie, we talked years ago about levels of accreditation and the museum and how that impacts the ability to get in exhibits from other museums, you know, across the nation. And when I was looking at the operational breakdown, you know, and the exhibit expenses in terms of supplies. Now, I guess my belief is that, you know, if the ability of our museum expands and we have the ability to get in more like noteworthy exhibits that, you know, are currently on exhibition somewhere else, you know, those sorts of costs will go up. That's just my general assumption. And again, if I'm wrong on that, correct me. But I guess my follow-up question to that statement is, where are we in terms of getting the necessary accreditation in order to bring in those larger or more noteworthy exhibits?
It's not a matter of accreditation because we have the highest level of accreditation in Alberta right now. So we are part of the Alberta Museums Association. It's a matter of size. Those exhibits require a certain amount of square footage in a singular space. So we're divided up into many rooms. So, you know, we've had the opportunity to bring in many of those traveling exhibits, but either we have to eliminate our rental space and then we're not getting money from that, or we take out all the other exhibits just for that one thing. So, you know, it's something that certainly could happen, but we are really limited for space and capacity for those things. Not that we can't do it. We have, like, we're totally available for that.
May I follow up, Mr. Chair? Thank you. So I guess, Maddie, in terms of, you know, again, trying to plan this sustainably into the future and looking forward, assuming that we can hit a critical mass of sustainable funding between both the town and the county, if we can hit that mark, is it fair to assume that we are still going to have to consider in the long term an infrastructure expansion so that we can have access to those larger traveling exhibits? Is that fair, or have you considered that? Just for my own information.
Yeah, certainly the Historical Society has considered that. They actually did many years ago, like they have an architectural design done up for an expansion, and there is like a spot for that. But I don't think that's anytime soon. We want to make sure that we are, stable here, and we're really developing the outside of the facility. And I think that's a really great reflection of Hinton, because now people are just coming when the museum's not open, and it's just a great place to learn about our history, take a break from driving. And yeah, we're working on that. So you got the Voyager display, we've got the Athabasca River display out there, the gardens, and that's what we're working on right now.
Okay, thanks a lot. I appreciate that.
Council, any other questions?
I want to add something to that, and that is, I'd like to invite council, well, all members, but especially those council and mayor who haven't been to the museum, the opportunity to go up there and really see what is there. Okay, I became president about a year ago. I have to say, I was never in there before. And I've lived in Hinton 50 years. So, and I was amazed, but until you see what they have in there, one can't appreciate it. Also, the programming is really involved in economic development to a degree, because some of the programming that Maddie and the assistant, when they had one, put together kits, and they were selling hundreds of these kits throughout the province and maybe even further. One of the kits, that I had a liking to was one which deals with mining, coal mining. And it just explains the whole process and helps take away this idea that it's a disaster in the end, and including right down to shipping. And each one of those kits is for individual students. So teachers have an opportunity. They don't have to do hardly any background work because it's all there. And hundreds of those were sold before. We can't do that anymore because we only have one person. And if tours come in, Maddie's got to pay attention to the tours. And then we have a lot of other stuff going on. For example, when the Voyager canoe came in, Maddie immediately then put in one of the rooms dealing with the Voyageurs, so we can move quickly. But if we don't get funding, you may inherit it.
Thank you, Mr. Griswold. Just for administration, somebody had mentioned something about next week. Is there something coming with the museum for next week?
There's the partnership agreement.
Okay.
That was the commitment made out of the civic agency, because it's one of the groups that council funds on an ongoing basis that does not have a partnership or an agreement of some sort with them to lay that out. So that is coming next week.
Perfect. So I guess for council, if we were to make some sort of bridge funding agreement, that would be at the October 5th meeting anyways. So there could be direction or motions made tonight to bring it back to the October 5th meeting. It could also be something we address next week as we kind of learn more about maybe what the long-term capacity and funding may look like. So just a few options for council, but Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was first and foremost, Ross and Maddie, thank you for taking the time, and we know how hard you guys work. So I look forward to finding a solution for the bridge funding at the very least. The other ones, I think, we have time on our side to some extent to prepare for 2022. For administration, I guess it's more asking acting CEO or interim CEO Howard, is it better if there is a will of council to deal with the bridge funding on the 5th to be better prepared by getting direction tonight or on the 21st that is standing through the report?
The report will be quite comprehensive. It will include all of the kinds of things that you would typically see in an administration report, including some options perhaps on how to fund the immediate ask of the group. So there are 3 options right off the bat of where there might be pockets of money for council's consideration. And then you can have that in context in the report next week.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. With that, I'm comfortable having that conversation on the 21st and then moving forward with the will of council. So thank you.
Looks like
Ms. White.
Thank you through to the chair and the remainder of council. This item with respect to bridge funding does not fall within what would typically be seen in the partnership agreement, because that is to address 2022. There's nothing in there with respect to the remainder of 2021. However, I have identified some funding sources to assist the museum with this at the will of council. So I would appreciate a motion this evening that would allow me to then include that in the report next week. It would be very simple addition at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Way. And for confirmation's better, you'd prefer a direction for next week, not for the 5th, so it can be part of the other one, or is it easier if it's separated? Okay, part of the 5th. Councilor Good?
Sorry, just to confirm for the 5th,
No, for next week,
for next week? Okay, sounds good.
21st.
Then I'm prepared to bring forward a direction. Like to direct administration. Oh, sorry, Sandra, I'll wait till you're ready.
Time to share.
So yes, please. We'll just make sure that I'm on point. That committee direct administration to bring back a discussion item to the October 21st.
September 21st.
Oh, sorry, September 21st. Standing committee. Meeting of council. Including possible options for bridge funding the Hinton Historical Society allotment
Else.
for 2021.
Councilman, just for clarification, discussion items are generally things that administration doesn't bring anything to support. So maybe an action item.
Sorry, yeah, I suppose an action item is more appropriate in this case. Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Did you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, just very briefly, I think we've battered this around the table. I think giving administration to bring some potential funding options back to council in advance of our next regular meeting of council, so that we can have that discussion around the table, figure out what some potential sources are, if that's the will of council moving forward into the October 5th meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Newman. Council, any other questions for the direction of the floor? Seeing none, I'll call.
We will leave now, and I'd like to thank you very, very much for listening to us. And also, I want to mention that Ms. Way has been very cooperative and brought in some excellent ideas for us. So that is much appreciated.
Perfect. And we're just about to call the question, but I as chair, I'd like to thank you for coming. I've taken advantage of a lot of the museum's programming, as have my kids. And I'm looking forward to a time when COVID's over so I can send them back there for big chunks of the summer so that Maddie gets to deal with it instead of me. So thanks for your presentation. So, council or committee, we do have a direction on the floor. Does anybody need it recapped? Okay, so all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thanks so much, Mr. Griswold and Ms. Sharman.
Thank you.
That takes us to our next agenda item, which is boards and committees of council reporting. And I will turn it over to Kristen Chambers, CAO of Evergreens Foundation.
Hello, everybody. How are you guys today? It's nice to virtually see everybody. Everyone can hear me okay? Yeah, excellent. So hopefully everyone has their package. Everyone has their package in front of them. I don't need to screen share. We're good. So as usual, the Evergreens Foundation has been very busy.
Just 1
COVID.
second, Ms. Chambers. They can do the, do you have it to share on screen?
She said she could screen share too. Did you want her to share her screen?
Yeah, I think so. And then the
Okay.
public can at least see what we're going through as well, so.
Okay, you guys are there? Can you see that?
Perfect.
Okay. So yes, as usual, the Evergreens Foundation has been very busy with moving ahead with our strategic plan, despite the challenges that we've had with COVID. We certainly have been continuing to move forward, recognizing the needs that we have within our region. So a little bit of an update on Pine Valley, because of course that's near and dear to all of you. We are cruising along very well. We're on schedule, we're on budget, which you don't hear that very often. Very few delays due to COVID. We had a couple of items that sort of came in at the 11th hour, but we are on schedule to we're looking to move residents on over this weekend, actually. So Saturday and Sunday we'll be moving residents from the existing Pine Valley facility into the new facility. We're not taking new residents at this time. It's just a move of our existing residents right now. We'll operationalize the building and then assess from there at what point if we're able to take in some additional residents. Looking at a construction completion of early spring. So we're kind of looking at that April, May 2022 for when the entire building is built out. And yeah, so very exciting times for us. We will have the demolition of the existing 30-unit Pine Valley Lodge happening sometime between the last 2 weeks of September. So that will be change the landscape a lot there, as well as the final phase, which is the build out of all the fun spaces. That's our cafe, exercise room, garden spaces, indoor garden, all of that stuff will be built out in that final phase. And right now our existing facility is sitting on that property. So lots of exciting stuff to come. And yes, the building will get bigger because it's going to keep growing. So that's very exciting. So the reason for my visit today is to give an update to the council and different municipalities. I'm actually going to all of our municipalities that are members of Evergreens to talk about our future capital plan. As you know, or may know from the letter or previous terms on council, the Evergreens Foundation did come and approach councils for a letter of support before we were looking at the Parkland Lodge project in Edson and the Pine Valley Lodge project in Hinton. So this is a very similar formality where we're taking the opportunity to update you on what our next two plans are, and then requesting that we receive a motion of support from council, understanding how this will affect the capital and operating requisitions of the foundation going forward. The two projects that we're going to be moving ahead with is one in Yellowhead County. In 2014, Yellowhead County did a needs assessment study, and it showed a very large underserved senior population within that east end of Yellowhead County. Recognizing that, the east end was earmarked as part of our strategic plan for the addition of a seniors facility. Yellowhead County did donate land, a beautiful piece of land actually in the hamlet of Wildwood. And we've been very successful so far in catching some seed funding from CMHC in order to move ahead with some of the preliminary planning and site design, geotechnical studies, things like that with this project. So it will be a 45-unit project to start, real greenfield project. So the whole idea of this project is to meet the seniors in a way that I always try to say, what is a day in the life of a senior in Hinton look like when we're building the lodge? What does a day in the life of a senior in Edson look like? Well, very much so. What does a day in the life of a senior living in the country in Yellowhead County look like? And how can we mimic that within the development of this facility? So it'll be a one-story building with multiple garden spaces, views to the fields around, and have a very agricultural feel to it. So we're really excited about being able to meet this need. Yellowhead County has made it very clear that they are investing in their hamlets and wanting to meet their senior population. where they're comfortable, where they want to live, and keeping them within their communities, much like we wanted to do in Hinton, of course. So really excellent to see this moving ahead, and very nice as well to see that as I scroll down here, it's very difficult to check the boxes for any algorithm with CMHC for funding. And to be quite frank, I was a little concerned about a rural community meeting a lot of the requirements, but we're very happy to see that we have received that seed funding at $225,000, which does indicate that we're meeting the boxes from a need and a location standpoint, and we'll continue to press for funding from the federal government through the National Housing Strategy as we've received for Hinton. The other project that is very exciting is we are actually just currently right now working on our Victor Lake Indigenous Elders Lodge within the MD Greenview. So the Elders Lodge is just outside of Grand Cache, and it is on cooperative lands. We have struggled as a foundation to adequately serve the needs of the Indigenous population within the cooperatives. It's been a struggle for the foundation for many years. In our strategic planning we did 4 years ago, Councillor Winston Delorme from MD Greenview brought up this issue, and we immediately started to pursue how we'd be able to meet a requirement. So this year, I did apply for funding through the Indigenous Housing Capital Plan, the IHCP. That funding was, excuse me, initially released through the NDP government as investment dollars, but was re-released as grant funding within the last couple of years. So we applied for that, and we were one of 2 projects awarded in the province, which is amazing. And so we received $2.25 million in grant funding towards this facility. So very proud moment for the Evergreens Foundation, and a very proud moment for the Indigenous population living on the cooperatives, as showing that they have been recognized by the province of Alberta as being a group that's qualified to receive this type of Indigenous housing funding. So very exciting. It'll be a 12-unit facility. The dollar value is quite high on this project, as you will see. And a lot of that comes from the fact that we are on remote lands that do not have a lot of servicing. So future conversations, actually next week, I'll be meeting with the MD Greenview, where we will be talking about some potential opportunity to work with the MD to work on some of the infrastructure costs. And again, these facilities are not designed out. This is all conceptual at this point. But very excited to see this moving forward. As with the Wildwood project, of course, we will continue to press the federal government for any and all available funds, as Indigenous funding is definitely a stream that the federal government is investing in right now as well. So we'll continue to do that as well. And yeah, I don't know if anyone has questions for me about, I don't need to go through the whole strategic plan. I'm hoping all of you guys read that, so.
Perfect. Thanks, Ms. Chambers, and thanks to your Evergreens and your work and the work of the board to bring some really innovative projects forward. You know, everybody was willing to offer letters of support for Hinton's, and you know, at least for me, I think it's pretty simple for us to offer that letter of support as well. But I'll turn it over to council if anyone from council has any questions. Councilor Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kristen, no questions for you. Great job as usual. My only question for administration is, seeing that there's no financial commitment to this, could we just simply pass this tonight at committee, or what's the recommendation of administration?
Thanks. So you could make a direction for administration to follow up on some part, or we would bring it back to the October 5th meeting if you wanted to put something in writing to them. Or unless it's the committee wants to direct you to submit a letter on behalf of them, you could do that tonight.
Thank you.
A couple options.
Councilor Magoo.
Yeah, again, I'm happy to provide whatever appropriate support there is. Ms. Chambers, I just want to say thank you. It's so exciting to see the build out and what's happening down in the valley right now. But also more than that, and I feel really strongly about that. One of the best things about being involved with Evergreens is also seeing our partner communities, also benefiting from this. So it's awesome to see what's happening in other places. And it's also fantastic to see, how our seniors are going to benefit as well. So thank you. And thank you so much.
Welcome.
Council, any other questions? Guess we looking for a direction of some sort. Mayor Michael?
So, Mr. Chair, if after hearing interim CEO Howard, if it's a direction to the mayor, then I look to council to give a direction, directing the mayor to send a letter recognizing, et cetera, the suggested motion within the Evergreens report. I feel a little bit odd telling myself to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'll leave it up to council whether we want this to come back to October 5th at a regular meeting of council, or if you're interested, direct the mayor. Councilman Good.
Yeah, I guess my question really to Ms. Chambers, because I want to make sure I get everything right. Ms. Chambers, is there any kind of time crunch if we were to bring this to the October 5th meeting of council to pass something like this?
Nope, the October 5th meeting is absolutely fine. There's no issue with that.
Thank you. Councilman Good, anything to add to that?
I guess my question would be for either administration or council if we want a firm direction on the floor, or if it would be the plan of the agenda committee to see that this was brought to the October 5th meeting of council.
For me, as part of agenda prep, I'd almost prefer direction where it's our only meeting between now and the election, and there's a lot of moving pieces right now. So just having that on paper would probably be valuable.
I'll take a shot then. Sorry, Ms. Rendell, I'll wait until you're good to go. Direct administration to bring back a request for decision regarding a letter of support for the Evergreens Foundation and their strategic plan for developing
I'll get it. I'll take Or
developing seniors housing in Wildwood and Victor Lake.
Councilor Magoon, just a question. RFD would require, again, a bunch of work from administration. So I'm just wondering if the intent is that, or if it's just a draft letter of support.
Just a draft letter of support. And if admin wants, if we want to rejig that, I'm completely fine with it. I just tried to get something on the table.
Yeah.
that good like that?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just the second A after draft. And, does that fit your intent there, Councilor Magoon?
100%, yeah, absolutely.
And did you want to speak to?
Sorry, and if I may also, to the October 5th meeting, regular meeting of council. I think that's implied, but let's just get it on there.
Okay.
No, I'd look for council support so that we can talk about this at a regular council meeting. Thank you.
Council, any other questions? Is a motion on or direction on the table? Seeing none, I'll call the question that Community Direct Administration bring back a draft letter of support for their Greens Foundation and a strategic plan for developing seniors housing in Wildwood and Victor Lake to the October 5th, 2021 regular meeting of council. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Ms. Chambers, I'd like to thank you for your continued work and looking forward to seeing people moving into the new facility right here. Thank you.
Lots of exciting stuff coming up. Thank you very much.
Right, council, that takes us to our first action item, first one being COVID-19 Resiliency Support Program Grant Update, and I'll turn it over to administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through the council. So the item in front of you is an information item, and I thought there might be someone else to support, but this is our resiliency support program. And of course, the goal of this small business grant program is to support and promote that entrepreneurship, the business retention, the business recovery, specifically around the COVID-19, and increase that potential of businesses to pivot or basically reimagine what their business models would look like in the future in order for them to continue to be successful. The amount of the grants available is a maximum of $750 per business. And so we just wanted to bring a report in front of you for information to give you a bit of a status of where we're at with that. And if I may invite Mr. Kovac, since the time that the agenda went out, we have additional information to share with you. And so if he can have the floor, he will do that now. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Kovac.
Mr. Chair, through to CEO, Acting CEO Howarth. The information to present today is an update with regards to the numbers that were initially issued in the report dated August the 10th. The new numbers are as such. We've had to date, as of yesterday, 8 applications and 7 approvals. And the approvals will total $52.50 or $5,252. And at current, then the remaining balance would be $94,750. Further to, if I may,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, through to CEO Howarth and Council. There were some questions and some recommendations associated with the information item this evening, and just wanted to reiterate that the initial recommendation was to provide this funding to sustain the businesses through this difficult period and to create opportunities for those businesses to be sustainable. Some questions have arisen with regards to the impact of the program. Obviously, that's the reason for the update. And there have been some recommendations. And I believe that those recommendations are there to increase the capacity of the grant to impact positively on the business community and to provide as much assistance as possible through these hard times.
Thank you, Mr. Kovac. Council, any questions or feedback on this agenda? Councilor McGee?
Yeah, really, it's a legislative question. If it was the will of council to move forward with something like, say, the removing the requirement of two employees as a prerequisite, I'm assuming that we would bring that back to a regular council meeting as a decision, like out of standing committee this evening, we would direct administration to bring it back for decision. Just procedurally, that's my question.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Councilor Waugh and Councilor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for administration with regards to the second amendment that's been proposed. Remove the requirement of 2 employees as a prerequisite. My understanding was the 2 employees was tied to the fact that unless that business had a storefront. So I'm wondering what the impact would be from changing it from 2 to 1. Because it's part of a larger condition.
Administration, Mr. Kovac.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Council. Yeah, so Obviously the impact is going to be greater in that regardless of whether it is a storefront business or not, those individuals, depending on the scale of their business, whether they have one employee or not, could have upwards of $300,000 worth of sales. And those same businesses could have contractors that are dependent upon the success of their business as well. So there's a significant trickle down effect as far as actual numbers that would change. That would have to be reported post haste. Certainly can't make any predictions as to the numbers or the impact difference. But the fact is that it's obviously going to cast a wider net, and it's going to have greater opportunity to impact more businesses and the businesses that those businesses deal with.
Thank you, Mr. Kovach. Councilor Rock, go ahead.
If I could ask for another clarifying, I guess I'm looking for what scenario would that open up the envelope? I guess what types of businesses would now be incorporated into this amendment that wouldn't qualify before?
Okay. I think that if I may clarify, the question is what types of businesses would be included?
Yeah,
And
if this amendment was approved.
Right, and if that's the case, it's very open to whatever type of home business you have. You could have a home business that does back office reporting. You could have a home-based business that only has one employee that does creative contracting work. Really, it's any single-based operated business, single purse-based business is included. So you could have someone who does accounting from their home as a single business that doesn't have a shingle and doesn't have bricks and mortar, but only has one employee, right? So the same thing could be for an artisan or some other person that has a home-based business that's selling and generating other contracts inside the community to support the business that they operate.
So if I may summarize, Jerry, so essentially it would be opening it up more to home-based businesses.
I guess that's a definition based on if we use the term bricks and mortar being a conventional business, and the majority of those conventional businesses have more than one employee, certainly, but it's not limited to home-based businesses. I mean, there are businesses that have bricks and mortar that only have one employee as well. Just want to be clear about that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, good. Kovach. Councilor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have two questions, but I'm going to start off with one. The requirements, there's been some concern on some of the requirements. And I guess one of them is regards to like outstanding bills, things of that nature, taxes and stuff like that. Is that a standard, typical way that, a grant such as this would practice to review the financials of the organization? And I see that, this particular grant doesn't cover salaries, rent, any lease improvements, commercial mortgage payments. I don't see anything in there, say, GST or anything like that. Is that something that is in our grant approval process, and is that a standard practice for things like this?
Yeah, administration, if you have that information, if you need to report back, feel free to request that as well. Go ahead, Mr. Kovach.
I, at this point in time, would like to make that request. I don't have that information in front of me with regards to our policy, and I can't speak at this time with regards to policies of other grants. I can only speak of my personal experience. So at this point in time, I would suggest, if I may, Mr. Chair, that we bring that information back.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Ross, if you want to go with your second question, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess my other question, thank you, Mr. Chair, is with the 7 approvals, if we were to consider the recommendation also of doubling the grant from 750 to 1,500 in the report, would those applicants that's been approved at 750, what would they potentially have to do then to get the extra? Like, would they automatically receive that if we changed it, or would they have to go through the process again?
Mr. Kovach, go ahead. If you're able.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Haas. At this point in time, that detail hasn't been confirmed, and that's other information that we can also bring back to you at this point in time, or in future, sorry.
And just for context, Councillor Haas, through the other community futures financing programs they did before, anyone that had already submitted already had 90% of it done. So it was quite efficient to add the extra RRF funds. So a lot of the work, I think, wouldn't be duplicated. So, from experience within other things that Community Futures has been able to put forward, it's been pretty efficient. So Councillor Magoon, Michaels, and Councillor Race.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I guess the question I have is, have there been any issues in terms of communication or misunderstanding on part of our businesses who've applied or haven't applied in the understanding of the clause that there must be 2 employees as a prerequisite unless it's a brick and mortar? Has there been any confusion communicated to us about that? Because I know I've actually received some folks who seem to be misunderstanding that particular clause, the unless it's a bricks and mortar. So if you could speak to that.
Yes, Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Magoon. I meet on a regular basis with the contractor with Community Futures that administers the program, and that issue has not been brought to my attention through those meetings as an issue of contention.
Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is along the lines of Councillor Hawes's, and I'll see if I can approach it a bit different. Other than the 2 options that you had presented, Mr. Kovach, that may help entice people, seeing that only 5% of the budget has been used, what are some of the other ones that may remove some of the difficulties perhaps, or I'm trying to get a sense of why people are just not taking the $750. And under the category of what is not eligible, is there something that you believe that could entice people to? Again, I'm trying to get councils to better understand why people are just not applying for this money.
Yeah, Mr. Kovach, same thing. If you have some ideas, great. If not, we can always direct a report to come back as well. So
Certainly, Mr. Chair, through to Mayor Michaels, to answer the one portion of the question, in the communications that we have between Community Futures and our administration, there haven't been any indications of any barriers or any suggestions of changes to the criteria that we have at this point in time. But I think that it's also something that we could bring back in recommendations at a future date.
Thank you.
Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. And that actually was one of my questions too. Why eight people? When we have so many businesses, so many business licenses being issued, why only 8 have applied for this? So, what you're saying, but my other question is, it's more of a clarifying question. Are you saying that a home business, 1 employee, qualifies for this?
So at this time, it doesn't qualify, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Kovach, and maybe some clarification under also sole proprietorship as well. So if it's a home-based business and we remove 2 employees, it would be open to people that don't have any dedicated employees, correct?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Reese. If I'm understanding the question correctly, it is with regards to the recommendations. The recommendations are there to open up the application process to as many businesses as possible, to increase the threshold so that more of the businesses have an opportunity to have access to the funding so that they can have that to maintain their business and to sustain them through these tough times. So the intent is to open this to as many businesses as possible.
Paula? Yeah.
Thank you. So in saying that, do we need to be specific in saying, home-based business?
Mr. Chair, through
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Race, I think that's at the will of council. The recommendation is to, in my interpretation, to open this to as many individual businesses as possible. And I think that we may get hung up in some of the jargon. I think the intent is to make sure that this funding becomes available to all of the businesses that desire it, that meet the criteria.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Skovich. I have Councillor Boone and Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, really, and I think the following is consideration for council. To the best of my knowledge, have we received any feedback from our partners of the Chamber of Commerce specifically yet on this? And I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think maybe a good next step, because we do have a question, right? We have some uptake on the program, but certainly not to the tune of what it's funded at. I think before we go forward making any changes, it might behoove us to do a little engagement with our partners at the chamber and simply say, look, this is the condition of our grant program right now. We're not seeing a large amount of uptake. Representing the business community, what are your thoughts on this? I think that really would be a good next step, because I don't see, even if it's not within the span of this council, having that feedback to direct the decisions of the next council, it would be measured and focused. So that would be something that I would like to see personally. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boone. I have Councillor Ross.
Yeah, and I guess I was of the same mind as Councillor Boone. I think, we went into this knowing this is the first time that as a town that we've offered a grant specifically like this, and this is an opportunity to learn from it. And we're a few months into it. Yes, we've got some uptake, but not as much as we expected. I think that some collaboration. One is, and I appreciate administration, and the report. I guess for me personally, I was hoping to also hear from Community Futures representative here as well to get some information possibly from them at this point. But I think that it is an opportunity to maybe sit back and collaborate some more with our partners to see if things aren't working, then what might we adjust? Whether it is the employee issue, whether it is the amount of money, or if there's other factors that might be also in the application process that might be a barrier potentially. And I mean, I think I don't speak for all council, but for myself, I don't want to create barriers. I want to make this, as fair as possible. I mean, I appreciate the fact that there is standards that grants, typical grant applications follow. I don't want to, necessarily bring those rules or those standards necessarily, but I think we do have an opportunity to maybe look at this in a little more detail with all the partners and figure out where we go from here. So
thank you, Councillor Ross. And I just wanted to comment and I've had that discussion with Community Futures. They're the contractor on this file, so it wouldn't really be. I don't think it's something that we would want to bring in the contractor. It's really the town's contract, and then they're just carrying it out. So it's a unique relationship for our council with Community Futures. Is generally they're more of a partner relationship. This is unique that it's a contractor relationship. CO Olsen? Or CO Howard?
Thank you. I know that we did have a 60-day trial period, and I know that's expired. So I'd like to invite Mr. Rousseau to just speak on that. If there's anything else he can add to maybe help council with some direction that you might want on this matter.
Go ahead, Mr. Rousseau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, CAO Howard. Yes, I wanted to just take you back, Council, to the May the 4th meeting that we had a request for decision. There was a note in that after the 60 days have expired, that we could consider opening this up to a wider business audience. And what that would mean, we could look at the eligibility criteria, we could look at the uptick or the lack thereof, and go back to CFWY to look at why the uptake was slow. Was it because the barriers that we set in terms of eligibility may have compromised the ability to take this up further? And then furthermore, we do have to check with our partner CFWY that the additional administrative duties that could come with this opening up wider the net to others. I don't see that as an issue, but just out of due courtesy to them to see what that administrative burden may be to them.
Thank you, Mr. Russo. Councillor Haas and myself.
So, if I may, Mr. Russo, thank you. So hearing that, what would be your recommendation for a motion of council to initiate that 60-day trial and have that conversation? What would be administration's need there to do that?
So thank you through to the chair to Councillor Haas. I would say not verbatim, but these were type of the words that we'd be looking for, that council direct administration to have a conversation with CFWY. Should we open it up to a wider business audience, that what would be the impacts to the administrative responsibilities and why was the uptick low in their view? And then we can come back and provide council what the criteria should be. Maybe it's a business license that's a requirement. Maybe we don't get too heavy into the financial statement side of things and gross revenues. So we relax some of the criteria, but yet have it contained. So that would be the motion in some shape or form. I would expect us to see from council, please.
Thank you, Mr. Russo.
Thank you.
Anything to add, Councillor Haas?
No, not at this time. I'm trying to formulate.
I haven't spoken yet. For me, I would prefer to just let this ride for a little bit more time. The urgency of putting this in was really to create something to deal with the urgent and something that was sweeping and could have a significant impact. What we're seeing, and it's not just our municipalities, it's other municipalities that put these programs in, unless you're going to hit a significantly higher amount, and I don't believe that 1,500 would get you there too, based on the municipalities, you're likely not going to have a huge amount of uptake. You know, if there's a few more between now and as the next budget is developed, maybe it's at $90,000. I would love to see the next council have a little bit of wiggle room. There might be other economic development opportunities that can impact all businesses, big or small, that are a little bit more overarching rather than these targeted ones. So for me, I won't be in support of it, and part of it's timing too. We have one more regular council meeting before the end of our term, and I'm concerned that something that isn't having a huge impact right now is something that we're sending administration to work on. So for me, I'm happy just to let it ride as it is. And we're all going to be knocking on doors over the next month and a half too. And I think we might learn a lot through that process of where the community would see some of this money best spent. So that's my perspective. Thank you. And Councillor Haas.
No,
thank you. Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My comments coincide largely with yours. I don't know if this is the time to send administration back to change a lot of criteria. I think the only thing I might be open to is increasing the amount to 1,500 because that wouldn't require too much work. It'd be something easy to trigger and see if that sparks any more interest. Some feedback I had heard from some businesses that had applied or had considered applying was that the amount of work involved might not be worth it for $750. Maybe if we double it, maybe it would spawn a little bit more interest, but I'm with you. I wouldn't be in favor of going back and reviewing and amending a whole bunch of the criteria just now. I think you're right. That might be something better served after the election. Can I ask a quick question of it as well? Is this due to come back before council for November? There's a motion, I believe, is there not? For this to come back in November?
Sorry, I don't have the action pending list in front of me. Mr. Russo may know that, as it's probably assigned to his area if he's got something outstanding and coming to the incoming council. If we can just take a couple minutes, we can answer that for you. Get back to you. Thanks.
Councillor Haas, you were in the queue. Did you have a question?
Not a question, just
go ahead. We'll start back to Councillor Watt.
Yeah, and I understand that the timing, is we're seeing this a few different things right now, but I guess I just wouldn't want to see way too long. Because I mean, this we don't know where the whole COVID is going and, you know, the money may be needed. And I personally would like to see, I had some of my reservations in the beginning about the $750. I mean, granted, every little bit helps, but I guess my concern is the amount of possible work that had to go into it to receive that amount. So I too would like to see, especially with that amount that's still in the reserve, to increase it to that recommended $1,500 to see, you know, give some more relief to our businesses as well, which may contribute to the uptake in the applications as well. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Mr. Russo, were you able to track down the if there was an action pending? Mr. Kovac, go ahead. You're just on mute there. You're on mute there, Mr. Kovac.
I thought I hit that one. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, through to I apologize, Mr. Wall, Councilor Wall. So from the original May 4th admin report, there is language that says create a mandatory review for a program, for the program prior to November 15th, 2021. So it doesn't say anything about bringing a report back. Specifically, it states as a bullet point, create a mandatory review for the program prior to November 15th, 2021. That's from the May 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Kovac.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Kovac. Thank you.
Perfect. Council, any other feedback? Councilor Mugu?
I'd like to move that committee accept the COVID-19 Resilience Support Program grant update for information.
Just give the administration a second to get it on the board there.
And if I can speak to it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in order to do this well, I think if it's the will of council to go and make some changes, I think those changes have to be measured, and I'd really like to see it done in collaboration with both our contracting partners and our partners in the business community. And ideally, you know, the Chamber of Commerce, and we have other associations, Valley Merchants Association, that sort of thing. And I think in terms of the timeline that it would take to do that well, I think that will stretch into the next council. And so it really does give them a choice of, do they want to continue to tweak this plan, or do they want to, you know, sort of change the direction of that particular funding model? And again, I think with the time that we're at right now, it's best simply to accept this for information and allow a future council to tackle that.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. We have a direction on the floor up to Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question and a comment, I believe. My question to administration, Mr. Kovac was indicating that it's a review on November 15th. Can we get maybe a breakdown or at least a high level understanding of what does that review look like on the 15th?
Administration, I guess, if we're not prepared to answer, we could also do it via email, I guess, offline, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Kovac or Mr. Russo.
I will defer to Mr. Russo, please.
So thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Kovac. The way I would interpret that, the breakdown of what we'll be bringing forward on that November the 15th would be, one, we have circled through with all of the partners or the stakeholders that has touched this or that is interested in this. That could be CFWY, that could be the chamber, that could be our business community, and that could also help us internally to look at what all the opportunities are, options are for council to consider at that time. That will determine whether we indeed continue to foster this opportunity to either increase or increase a wider audience. That's just my drop-down list that I think that we should be including at the minimum.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that answer. As long as the 15th will allow the future council to potentially pivot and see what has not been working, then I'm comfortable, because I didn't want that to just be a review and then we have another discussion on what these options are going to be. So if administration will be providing that on November 15th, I'm content, and hopefully some changes will be done. My other comment, and Councillor Watt talked about letting this move forward, but he did indicate an appetite for the $1,500, and I'm kind of on the same page. That's the one thing that I can see. If we doubled it, all I've heard is how much input or how much work you have to put in for $750. I would be on board of doubling it tonight. I'd be fine moving forward with that and at least seeing where that goes. To me, that's not changing in analyzing the whole thing and breaking it down. It's just simply doubling it. And how many months has it been? And it's only been 5% has been utilized. So I'd be interested to see if council has any appetite for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. That's Councilor House and Councilor Magoo.
So two things, I guess, on that. I was going to speak in favor of this, knowing that the November 15th gives a little bit more time with the stakeholders engagement, basically what we've been talking about this evening, you know, and it also gives then opportunities for business owners to maybe engage those stakeholders, to let the chamber know, things like that. However, based on, I too, you know, have the appetite, you know, potentially to look at and see what council feels on doubling it. It's just if we were to pass this as information, could we do that afterwards legislatively? So I guess that's where I'm at, because I believe that once we accept for information, that's it. So thank you.
Councilor Magoo.
Yeah, and just to speak to that, I'm hearing some appetite around the table, Mr. Chair, to explore that. And I think just legislatively, it'd be easier if I were to ask to withdraw this until we explore that question a little bit more fully. So if that's okay, out of respect to the rest of council.
Council, any objection with the direction being withdrawn? Seeing none, go ahead. Council, any new directions or motions? Yes, I'll ask a question. Does administration feel that if we were to make the change, the simple change to the dollar amount of $1,500, that it would impact the contract with Community Futures? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Kovac.
Mr. Chair, through to council, I believe that increasing the amount to $1,500 would definitely impact the program, and there would be an increase in the uptake.
So if I could follow up with council, one of the challenges we'll run into, if we do make a motion for the 1,500, we would likely want to follow that with a motion for a special meeting. The next Community Futures Board meeting is the 30th. And then our next regular is the 5th, and then the next Community Futures isn't until November 4th. So just the timing of how the board meetings time up with our regular council meetings, if there's going to be a contractual requirement from Community Futures that the board has to accept, we'll need to keep that in mind as we move through this process. Councilor Haas.
So I have a clarifying question to administration, if you mind. The recommendations, the options and amendments to grant requirements, was this a recommendation that either one or the other or both or whatever from the contractor, or was this a recommendation based on the conversation that administration is bringing back to us? So just curious where the recommendation is coming from. I know it says it's in review progress and discussed options to improve between Community Futures West Yellowhead and administration, but is this their recommendation?
I'll turn over to Mr. Kovac had addressed that he hadn't received feedback on changing the program from Community Futures or our partners, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Kovac if he has an additional to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Councillor Haas. Yes, these the two very specific recommendations with regards to increasing the dollar value and changing the number of employees came directly from Community Futures in consultation with them based on the interaction that they've had with the applicants.
Thank you. If I didn't follow up, so I guess I'm not. So I guess was there any conversation potentially with administration or with the Community West Yellowhead, and then with that recommendation to their contract specifically, was that brought up with that recommendation, understanding that that would change their contract?
Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Haas. Yes, so my understanding is that the contract to administer the program wouldn't change because they have the purview to do that. There would be some costs possibly associated with changing the software and the program that they use for the application. And that's the reason why it's suggested to do those two in tandem, that if you were going to do one and thought that you were going to do the second one, that they should be done together because it's a cost saving maneuver.
So I'll turn right back over to you, Councillor Ross. So direction tonight would be to potentially bring back the costs and implications of whichever of the recommendations to the October 5th regular meeting of council, as we would be able to make that decision tonight anyway. So just as a potential direction, it seems like maybe where we're going. Turn back over to you, Councillor Hawks, and then Councillor Race.
I'm good, thank you.
Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. To administration, and I apologize for this question. If you don't have the answer, 100% okay. What percentage of our home-based businesses make up our the business licenses that are given out?
Administration, if you're able to answer that, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Race, I don't have that information in front of me currently, but can make that information available to council in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Kovach. And council, just said, we've been on this for quite a while. We've made a motion, we've withdrawn it without opposition. I would just say if we want to refocus in, probably be appropriate at this time. Councillor Stashik.
I'd like to move the committee accept the COVID-19 Resiliency Support Program grant update for information.
Do you want to speak to it at all?
Nope, I think it's time to move on. This discussion is probably more appropriate at a future date.
Appreciate that. Councillor Stashik. Administration, do you have that direction up there? We'll continue discussing. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, my original was to accept or to be in agreement to the accepting for information. And based on, I think, the review coming in November 15th, and I think just the logistics of increasing it at this time, I think then getting this information back at the November 15th will get more, I think, understanding to the council at the table to, what kind of changes might be needed at that time with the engagement that they're going to make. I suspect that could be part of it, but I think I feel comfortable leaving it until that time. It's not that far away, and then the council of the day can make that determination at the time, especially with the idea that we also have to have community futures and your other expenses that are included, and give them the time to put that together as well. So, I would be in favor of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council. Seeing nobody else in the queue, I'll call the question that could you accept the COVID-19 Resiliency Support Program grant update for information. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Council, we have, I think, one more public agenda item. Do you want to power through that, or do we need a little break? All right, we shall power through. So that takes us to, although it's worded as an action item, it's largely a discussion item that was requested late last week around the non-residential tax incentive bylaw number 1161. There were a lot of questions brought up, and I think there's just a desire to have a little bit more time for discussion prior to it coming to third reading at regular council. And I would just ask that we keep it to discussions that will impact our decision on October 5th, because there's a lot of hypotheticals and a lot of different paths that we can go. And we can also direct to bring a report back if there's some information that we need. Turn it over to, did administration want to comment on it?
No, you covered it all. I have nothing more to add.
All right, so turn it over to council.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll begin. It was a great conversation. When we had our first conversation for this, we passed 2 readings, but there was, I believe, a crossroad. And my ultimate goal is I do want to pass this at our last regular meeting, but there was a lot of debate on whether it would include businesses that were started and got their permit in 2021. And I would be remiss to hold off or for us to not pass this on the 5th if we don't flesh out that conversation, or if we're comfortable my comments are, I'm okay going one of two ways. Flushing that out and landing on whether we want to or not, or passing this and amending in the future a decision when we have more time, seeing that we only have one more regular. But at the end of the day, my greatest fear is that we meet on the 5th with no more meetings, and that holds up what we've worked to this day. And there was a lot of strong comments the last time we met. So that's my concern. Thank you.
Mayor Michaels. Council, I don't have anybody in the queue. Council Race.
Thank you, sir, to administration. So I was able to find the development permits that were pulled in 2021. And the commercial permits that were pulled were 13, industrial were 4. So does this bylaw mean, because these permits were pulled in 2021, that they are out of the 5-year non-residential tax incentive program completely? Or could they, somehow make application this December, once this is passed, and at least go 4 years?
Right, CEO Olson. Sure, I'll get it at the end of the night.
That's good. So yes, the bylaw, once it receives 3rd reading, becomes active in that moment. And so the way that it sits right now is anybody who applies after October 5th, if it gets 3rd reading, is eligible to apply for this year, and they have to do that by the end of this year. So if council wants to, and I know that, again, you did circle around that a couple times at the last meeting, you can create some eligibility before that, whether that's July 1st, January 1st, I mean, any option is open to you. I know the comments were, well, where does it end? To help guide that conversation, the way the rest of it works is that each calendar year, if you get a development permit in that calendar year, you're eligible to apply before the 31st of that calendar year. So there is some logic and some intent, I believe, for council when they started to work on this back in January, February, that it would include this full calendar year for everybody. And so for many reasons, we're at the point where we are now in September, and then approval for October 5th, that while I would not normally advise council to create bylaws that are retroactive, there's merit in exploring that for this case because of the nature of it and what the intent was. And perhaps as well as the people and the businesses that were kind of waiting in the queue, hoping that this would impact them, but they also did not want to hold up on their development permits until October to do that because they lose their build season and everything. So it is reasonable in this case to explore having something that's retro. And if you're looking for a recommendation from council, or from administration, I would not go further back than January 1st of this year. You maintain the integrity of your bylaw, the intent of it, and for the next years moving forward.
Councilor Race, do you have a follow-up?
I do, thank you. So admin, tax money is very important to us, and everybody who builds a building, that is tax money that comes to us as revenue. We have 15 permits. I think they equal, or the development cost is over $1 million. How much tax money, can you give me a ballpark figure that we would not be getting?
If you're able to answer, if not, we can always direct that.
I have one other call a friend. Mr. Osmond has joined our meeting for the next item, and he may be able to answer that at a high level. If Mr. Osmond can join. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Osmond.
Sorry, I apologize to council. I was just distracted on another issue. Could you repeat the question for me?
Go ahead.
Sure. So the question from council, I'm sorry for putting you on the spot, Mr. Osmond. council is exploring their non-residential tax incentive bylaw. And it's going for third reading on October 5th, which is when the bylaw would be enacted. And what they're trying to explore is at what point could they make it retroactive? The conversation right now is to go back to, January 1st of this year, because that's the way the bylaw moving forward works. And the question from Councillor Race is, there's about $1 million worth of developments between January 1st and now that would normally be ineligible for this bylaw. And how much tax would we lose income on about $1 million of development? Did I capture that, everyone? Ish, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Osmond.
I'm just going to need a moment. I believe that I can tell you that.
Mr. Osmond, I'll give you a couple minutes. I have Councillor Magoon, Councillor Waugh, and then Mayor Michael's in the queue. So Councillor Magoon.
Yes, thanks. And I appreciate the input of administration so far. I think certainly that's been my intention, is to look at this calendar year and say that, you know, it meets the intent of what council discussed earlier on. My only concern really comes down to the dollars and cents, is that if we were to pass some caveat within the bylaw that allows any development going back to January 1st, are we at risk of losing any assessment that's already been collected up to this point? I don't, my gut says no, but I really need to know the answer to that before I would, you know, put forward any motions.
That's when you're able to answer. Interim CEO Howard.
No, not at this point. I
think too, like Mr. Osmond, anything you're able to answer kind of on the fly, go ahead. Council can always direct for a report containing X, Y, and Z in it as well, if that's something we need to help make that decision. And Mr. Osmond, just like put your hand up whenever you're ready with an answer, and we'll kind of continue through the queue as we go.
May I follow up to that for council? And I guess just for council to consider, I would happily support allowing our businesses to go back to January 1st to be eligible for this, provided, of course, it doesn't put the town in any kind of awkward financial state. And certainly if I had that information for the regular council meeting of October 5th, I'd be ready to go. And if admin says, nope, that won't hurt us at all financially, and here's what the rewording of the document would need to be amended to reflect going back to January 1st, I'd be fully able to make a decision on that night. So just for both administration and council, and that's how I feel about that.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Mr. Osmond.
Thank you very much. So I double checked the rate. At the rate of 9.2782 mils, $1 million worth of assessment generates approximately $9,280 in taxation for the municipality. If I understood the second question from Councillor Magoon, what would be the impact of putting this in? Assuming the assessment won't change at this point for 2021. So the taxes that are levied, council retroactively puts in the bylaw discounting them, then it's the value of the discount that affects the municipality. The assessment.
Sorry to hear. If you want to just cut, maybe you're kind of cutting in and out audio wise, so we didn't really catch everything prior to addressing Councilor Magoon's question we heard, but just the part subsequent to that we weren't able to hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So if I understand Councillor Magoon's question, assessment for 2021 is fixed and in the books. So there's nothing that can change the assessment as it stands. The taxation continues.
You're kind of coming in and out again, so it might be a connection issue, not an audio issue. I know
I'm gonna hold it real close and see if that helps. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I know you can see me. So with regard to the assessment for 2021 is fixed when the roll is approved in February. So there's really nothing that changes the assessment at this point. And so if you retroactively create an incentive that applies to the 2021 tax roll, the impact is really the value of the discount on the development.
Thank you, Mr. Osmond. Appreciate the close-up. I have Councillor.
Sure, just do a little follow-up, please.
Is it directly to that?
Same subject, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my concern is, right now we're issuing very, very few permits, when you look at a few years ago. So my concern is if all of a sudden we start issuing, commercial, industrial, institutional permits left and right, and we're on this tax incentive thing, how much tax dollars are we losing? So that's just a small concern I have.
We'll continue with the queue as is. So I have Councillor Waugh, Mayor Michaels, Stashik, Haas, Ben Magoon. Councillor Waugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to speak quickly to Councillor Rice's concern, I think that's the whole point of the incentive program, to spur that development, to create some of the byproducts of it, like jobs. But originally I was in the queue because I wanted to thank administration for their clarifying comments tonight. I was against going retroactive at the last meeting based on what we had, but there was a very clear and well-reasoned delineation back to January 1st. So I really appreciate that, and I could get behind that now with the explanation that was provided. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to put a direction on the floor that committee direct administration to amend bylaw 1161 to include a retroactive date of January 1st, 2021.
Before it goes, I do have a procedural question in that because we're already in the readings of the bylaw, can we legislatively direct an amendment at committee? Perfect, thank you.
If I may speak to it.
Hold it. Do you have the amendment up there? So make sure that-
Worded my way, is that okay? We got legal advice after on this.
If you want to share your screen, then Mayor Michaels can make sure it fits appropriately and then speak to it.
Perfect. I think that's what I said.
Word for word.
And then 4.1.4 would read, and that's just adding the red is what would be added.
Yeah. And thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Councillor Waugh for pointing out administration's comments really broke down that this is the process we're using in 2022, 2023, that you get your permit, but you do your application later. So it's the same concept that permits from earlier in the year or permits on October 8th, they still have until December 31st to do their application. So that was eloquently said, and I look forward to supporting this. And it really takes away those who chose to still build in the community in 2021 without it, and still gives the ability to other businesses, whether they're in Hinton or those coming, to take advantage of this and choose Hinton. So I'll be strongly in favor of this. Thank you.
Mayor Michaels, I have Councillor Ostashik, and we have a direction on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep my comments contained to the direction. I'll be in support of this. I feel this is an important step for our community to try and drive progress and development in the community. One thing I do want to make clear, from my perspective, at least, to the citizens and to Councillor Race's concern too, this tax incentive program isn't actually costing the town of Hinton any revenue. It's deferring future revenue for further down the road, but the trade-off is that we are incentivizing development. By incentivizing that development, we are going to get future tax revenue that without this incentivization, we may not have seen. This might be the thing that pushes some of the people who are sitting on the fence to go, yes, I do want to take advantage of that. I am going to do that development that I've been thinking about. And hopefully that's what we do get to see to come out of it. I do have a small question for administration, if I may. I'm assuming based on the previous comments from administration that the potential revenue from the million-ish dollars worth of development permits that have been pulled in 2021, that potential revenue isn't to this point being considered in preparation of the 2022 or future budgets, is it?
Administration is able to.
Not at this point, but if that ends up being the case on October 5th, then that's one of the factors we'll consider bringing forward a 3-year operating plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGoon and Councillor Haas.
No questions. Thank you.
Councillor Haas.
I just want to speak in favor of this. Coming into the meeting, I was really on the fence like Councillor McGoon. I was excited about the task incentive, the great things it could bring to our community. I'm even more excited about it now with administration sharing this information and now being able to benefit those developers and things that have done development in our community and can now benefit from this with the retroactive clause in it. So I think this is great for what's happening now and for the future of our community as well. So again, thank you administration for that input that made tip the scales for me as well. So thank you.
Thank you. For me, I'll be in favor. I'm not a huge fan of retroactive stuff, generally speaking, but I think for all intents and purposes, council was hoping to have this ready for this building season anyways, and with capacity and the amount of stuff in the queue, it wasn't able to happen. So I'm happy it's coming forward now, and I think this covers the original intent. So I'm happy to support it. Council, seeing nobody in queue, I'll call to question that community direct administration to add or have made subsequent to January 1st, 2021. To section 4.1.4 of the non-residential tax incentive bylaw number 1161 and bring back to the October 5th, 2021 regular council meeting for third reading. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Anything else for this agenda item, Councilor Administration? Councilor Stashik.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Well, it was just a question regarding the second part of that recommendation from administration, if administration requires a motion for that part as well.
For me, I think it was just summarizing what was in the original motion, and I think it is part of the motion. I only read the first part.
And that's fine. I'm just seeking some clarification from administration if that is the case or not.
Perfect. Ms. Randall or Ms. Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilor Sasha. It's basically just stating what 4.1.4 would look like with the addition to that was that bottom part, just so you guys knew what it said without going back to the bylaw.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
For reference.
Perfect. Mayor Michaels,
that was my question, yeah.
Perfect. Thanks everyone for the clarification. Councilor, we good to go through information items and reporting before we go to closed session and have a break after reporting? Discussion. Perfect. All right. Well, that takes us to discussion item of the showmobile. And I'll turn it over to Mayor Michaels. I sent an email earlier in the day to kind of summarize.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Council, for allowing this discussion item on the agenda. Again, being pressed with only having one other regular meeting of council, and there's a request to put on, a concert where the showmobile would be needed. This was going to be an indoor event, but because of COVID cannot no longer happen. So they're moving it outside, still with the unknowns of what may come in the coming weeks. But if this does move forward, I would like to support waiving the fees. This would take the potentially $500 from the donation fund, which I was unaware that we really sort of had a donation fund, and transfer it to the Parks and Recreation through Mr. Engerdal's department. And to me, this is a great cause, and even though there's other ways to deal with it, again, with only one more regular, I would look for the support of council to do this on October 5th. Thank you.
Just two clarifying questions. So do you know the dollar amount? And then also, because the event, I believe, is this weekend, if that group is okay, if that comes to them after October 5th?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll defer to administration for some of it. It's $500 for the rental, but that I was told by the.
Sorry, I apologize. That was, we advised incorrectly earlier. It's 500 for the second and subsequent days. It's 650 for the first day, and that's what it would be. Not significantly more, but I just wanted to clarify that in case it was worded in the motion. So it is, it would be $650. And yes, if the party can endure the upfront cost, that could be something that was funded in a retroactive way if it was clear tonight that council had every intent of passing that on the 5th. And yes, a couple different options is your council donation, where there's about $3,500 remaining in that line for 2021, or your council contingency where there's 17,800 remaining in that line for the rest of this year.
Thanks for that clarification. Mayor Michael, do you have anything else to council? Any questions? Councillor Hostin, Councillor Magoo?
Knowing this information now, knowing where it will come from, because of course that would be my question, if we have to make a donation. Knowing that, I would be in favor under the circumstances. I would be in favor. Thank you.
Councillor Magoo?
I'd be wholly supportive.
I only have one other question is, if we were to make a direction tonight, what would we make a donation to Rotary, or like, I don't actually know which group the donation would go to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had the same concern, but seeing that we're passing it on the 5th, I think if we, and I'm willing to put forward a direction, those are things I guess administration could work out with the groups to, instead of us kind of winging it on the fly, unless administration knows specifically the logistics of who to give it, because the insurance is technically under Rotary. But I think these are things that we could figure out between now and the 5th. Would be my train of thought, and I would leave that out.
My assumption is the easiest thing would be to make that to a club versus an individual in this case, and it is the Rotary, you're correct, who has is supporting the event, carrying the insurance for them, so that you can leave it open-ended, but that is likely where we will recommend that in a couple weeks anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take an attempt at putting a direction on the floor. That committee direct administration to bring, sorry, Ms. Rental, the showmobile donation requests to regular and to be funded from the donations. What is the wording for the donations?
Council donations account.
Of $650.
Mayor Michael, do you want to speak to it?
If I may, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's not a hill I'll die on the last one, but the fact that I kind of see this more as a donation instead of an emerging thing that we have a hard time quantifying on where to go. So I'd like to leave that discretion for other things that just tie less. But like I said, I won't die on that hill for that. And then to see what council thinks. Thank you.
Councilor Stash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not typically in favor of supporting requests to waive fees. There's so many organizations in our community that all need help, and if we start down that path, it's pretty soon all the services that the town provides are going to be given away for no charge. However, in this case, I really do want to make an exception. Like everything, this is a good cause as well. But the thing that I feel is a bit of an extenuating circumstance in this case is this was never the intent to host this function this way. There were alternative arrangements made, and due to circumstances that are far outside anybody's control, the indoor venue isn't a feasible option anymore. So as a second best option, this is what they'd like to do, but there was never any budget to pay for the venue. So I'm happy to support this. Thank you.
Councillor Haas, for you in queue?
Sure. Yeah, no, and I do, I think this is a great cause, and Councillor Stashik brings up a very good point that, yeah, it was never intended for this, and just another example of the collateral damage of COVID, unfortunately. So I'm happy that, you know, what this is going towards, and it's another event that is outdoors and safer for our community members to attend. So I'm really in favor. Thanks.
Haas. Anything else? Seeing nobody in queue, I'll call the question. The committee direct administration to bring the showmobile donation request in the amount of $650 to the regular meeting of council on October 5th, 2021, and to be funded from the council donations account. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. That takes us to our information items. First is council orientation 2022 budget process. CO Howard.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to council. I'll just introduce quickly, of course, Mr. Rob Osmond has joined us this evening. He's been assisting us with some of the work this year around our audit for 2020, as well as our first and second quarter projections from our 2021 budget. And so I know I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that the budget timeline process that council had approved back in March, we even missed many of the milestones that we had intended to meet due to those other priorities. And so Mr. Osmond is working with the town to bring us a new budget process that he's going to carry us through until the budget is approved. So this council and through to the new one. And we also have an update on what the budget timeline process looks like. So I'll pass it over to Mr. Osmond at this time and he can take you through that.
And Mr. Osmond, go ahead. If I'm not able to hear you, I'll just I'll get Councillor Stashik to put his hand up because he's closest.
Okay, thank you. I'm back on my earpiece, but I'm going to hold the microphone up to my mouth so we don't have to hold the whole computer. So hopefully this will work out for us. What I'd like to do, if I can share my screen, I put together a brief presentation for council to work through these items. So essentially, what I was asked to do was sit down and look at the budget process that we were engaging in for 2022 and then the planning years following. And see if there were refinements we could make to the process. So I put together a bit of a proposal. There's a couple of things that were driving us to have a look at these changes. The first is that the current timeline, one that was reviewed by council in the spring, there are parts of it that are simply not achievable in the timeline that is currently in place.
Excuse me.
There is also, I think, a need to align the budget process with the council transition following the election. A refinement of the budget development process in general. I want to make sure that we're improving the supporting information for budget and projects. One of the things that is really important to me as I help municipalities develop good budget processes is we know that councillors are able to make better and better decisions in budgeting and be much more comfortable with them when we are able to supply them with better and better information. So that's really one of the driving factors in the budget. Also, we're looking at a shift to focus more on service levels rather than the traditional budget focus of budget lines. The help there for council will be if we can help council understand how an individual budget decision affects the programs and services that are being provided to the community. It will help them better understand the decisions that they're making, and we can avoid the dreaded unintended consequences of budget decisions. I can't tell you in the past how many times I've worked with councils to develop budgets. Decisions get made, and later on we find out that the budget decisions that were made have some really impactful changes on service level that we didn't intend. And so I think that's really important. And also with that better information, service level focus forming the decisions, will be better, council will be better able to take ownership for those budget and plans. So that's why I think we're looking at some of these changes. I think the process we have will really help with that. So the budget schedule that I put forward is back at the beginning of the month, we did launch the budget with the organization. We did some budget orientations just to help the various departments understand what we're asking for them to do process. And tonight I'm here providing council kind of an outline of how the budget works and what their role will be. During the month of October, we've got a planned consultation with the public. This is an input consultation, so I think it's really important. So I outlined in our engagement plans that we reach out to the public, get some input of the budget. It's very important that input consultation is done at the front end so that we can be adaptive and inclusive of that information as we prepare our budgets. In the first week of October, we have the administration budget. So this is the time when departments have to have everything into senior leadership for budget review. At the end of the following week, administration will sit down as a group and do a thorough review of all the budget documents we have in place. That's the really important part on administration side, is to double check that everything is ready to go in front of council. Following the election at the beginning of November, I will do another one of these council orientations to the budget, recognizing that there could be changes in council's format as we move into a new term. It's important, I think, to touch base with the new council to make sure that they understand kind of where we are in the budget process and what to expect forward. Council deliberations on capital are scheduled on the 19th. So one of the things that we'd like to do is, I'll go into a little more detail later to show council how we develop this budget, but essentially there's an opportunity for us to break the capital apart from the other two components of the budget. If we're successful at being able to do that, what it will allow council to do is review the capital plan, and as long as they're comfortable that it meets the long-term goals, move forward with the approval of the capital budget in advance of the year end. This is really important because some of those big capital projects have some significant lead time, and in order for the project managers to be able to get everything lined up, RFPs completed, so that we're able to tackle these at the early part of the construction season, it would be detrimental to those projects to delay them to the approval of the remainder of the budget. And the reason we can't do it all is it's too short a time period to get all three components of the budget discussed in that time frame. So administration is looking to provide a capital budget to council, fully outlines the long-range plan for capital, so that it can be approved at the December 7th meeting. At that same meeting, there would be a request for decision looking for a motion to approve an interim budget for 2022. The interim operating budget is simply the tool we use when the preparation of the budget extends over the year end. It provides a limited scope operating budget, so basic functions can continue. Obviously, no operating projects or budget changes can be implemented during that time, but it allows us to do the basics to ensure that service levels continue while we continue the preparation. Also in that same time period, following the election, provide council with the opportunity to identify operating items that they would like considered when we sit down to do the final deliberations on the budget. So we'd ask that council prepare those and get them into administration for development by the end of November. All of this is gearing up to a final review by administration just before the Christmas break in mid-December, and then tentatively scheduled for January 21st and 22nd would be the council deliberations on the operating budget and all of the operating business cases provided. Assuming that goes well, we will have a series of decisions that sets us up with the final operating budget, and the budget and plan approval would then take place in February. So that's kind of the outline of how it all happens. These tools, the interim capital budget approval, these are common tools used across municipalities across the province. So it is quite common, especially in council election years, that the budget process does extend over the year end as a tactic to make sure that the new council has time to get themselves oriented before we ask them to engage in the planning, financial planning for the first year of their term. So when it comes to key budget tools, there's essentially three components. The first is what I call a base budget. And basically what we do is we take the budget, as council has seen it before, line by line budget. We strip out all of the one-time projects, all of the things that are either approved on a temporary basis or one-time basis, so that we get a budget that is the core of the services that have previously been approved by council. So the goal of this budget is to make sure that council is able to get a clear picture of what it costs to continue at the service levels they have previously approved. The reason for that is because all of the decisions about changing that operating picture, any changes, one-time projects, are then presented to council in operating business cases. And the concept here is that if we have a base budget and establishes a certain amount of room we have based on the current tax rate, council then can treat the operating business cases as essentially a series of light switches that they'll be able to turn on and off to see what their impact, what the impact of those decisions is on their bottom line. So when we present this to council, there would be a spreadsheet. It will have the impact of the base budget at the top, have listed all of the operating business cases, and there'll be an in and out decision beside each one. And as council decides whether or not individual projects, initiatives in or out of the budget, they'll be able to see in real time the impact that has on the overall tax rate of the organization. And in that way, they get the control to say, these are the operating projects we're going to proceed with in 2022, 2023, and 2024. And all of the other projects are going to have to be deferred to a later date. What I want to drive there is an understanding with council that it puts council in full control. If there are operating business cases that wants considered, make sure that they're on board. But ultimately, the decisions, the key budget decisions of what's in and out are all clearly in the hands of council. And so you're very much able to build the budget that council is. With regard to the capital side of the budget, we have much the same as the operating business cases. We have capital project profiles. So where often capital budgets are presented in a big spreadsheet that shows a list of projects spread out over the term of the long-term plan, the capital budget profiles project profiles add the additional dimension of providing council with the full scope and reason behind every capital project. In these documents, not only will the project managers outline for you the scope, the purpose, why the project is needed, you can expect to see an analysis of the finance, the timeline that we expect to see in the project, as well as pictures to help council understand kind of what the needs are in the project, what kind of assets they could be looking at. This allows council to make a better informed decision when looking at the capital project items. And with the help of Winston and his team, we're working now to put their long range capital plan into the capital project profiles format. And that should really improve the amount of information council gets about these items, which will in turn help inform their decision on how to manage the capital projects as we move forward. So I just had a couple of notes about where we are in terms of current council's role. I think there's a need to understand that the process changes are being made to ensure that council will be able to consider its budget decisions kind of like light switches, turning them on and off and immediately seeing their impact on the budget and taxes. What I'm also looking for from the current council is support with the timeline realignment to accommodate the transition of council following the municipal election and the changes that we're making to the budget process. As the budget deliberations will occur following the municipal election, work being done reviewing and deliberating the budget on behalf of the current council is not particularly efficient. We know that we have collected some information. Certainly all of the items that council may have referred to budget discussions in the year leading up to this planning piece. But we know we don't want to spend council's valuable time working on a budget following election. The new council will need to make their own. Administration is not requesting the current council invest that kind of time in these activities, given the current busy schedule. So essentially what we're looking for is your understanding of why we're trying to make these changes, support the timeline, and then when it's time, we'll bring back following the election all the materials council needs to make a better budget, that they can take better ownership and feel more confident that they understand the ins and outs of decisions that are made to create. So that's the end of my presentation. If there's any questions about the process with methodologies, I'm happy to answer them for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Osmond. I'll turn over to council. I think we're looking for direction to accept the budget schedule for our budget process for information, but if there's any clarifying question council has, feel free. Nobody in the queue. Anybody want to furnish a motion or a direction to accept the council orientation 2022 budget process for information? Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make that motion.
Perfect. Administration second on the board. So while we're waiting for it to go on the board, Mr. Osmond, thanks for that breakdown, and I think really valuable information for us and any of the soon-to-be candidates that are running, and having an idea what that time commitment looks like coming out of an election. It's a lot of work. So
thank you very much.
So it's Mayor Michaels that made that direction. Mayor Michaels, did you speak to it at all?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Same comments as you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Osmond, for. I know there's a lot on your plate, but this process is going to be extremely beneficial to the next council and set up for hopefully a great 2022 budget. So thanks so much.
Great, council. Seeing nobody in queue, I'll call the question that committee accept the council orientation 2022 budget process for information. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Osmond. That takes us to council reporting. I'll start on my right with Mayor Michaels.
Nothing to report.
Councilor Mude?
Nothing to report.
Councilor Waugh?
Nothing to report, sir.
Councilor Stash?
I do have nothing to report.
Councilor Race?
Thank you, sir. I was unable to attend my ASH meeting Sunday, and Councillor Hawes stepped in for me, and nothing else to report.
Right, Councilor Hawes?
And that's the only thing that I've had all week, and there's status quo there. There's some discussion on trying to generate some sort of business there to get some traffic in there, limited as it is, but yeah, and there are discussions with user groups moving forward with the future. So thank you.
Perfect. And I have nothing to report, so I'll turn it over to interim CAO Howarth for reporting and status report.
Thank you very much. So I have nothing to report, but I will, I mentioned this last week, so I'd like to mention again, next week in your agenda package for September 21st, you will have and see for the last time your action pending list. And so administration is working really hard to get the status column of all of the items updated. And so that you'll be seeing that Friday when your agenda comes out. If there's anything, and hopefully we may even have a chance to review a little bit of that at the agenda prep meeting on Wednesday, tomorrow. But if there's anything in there that you think we've missed significantly, we can certainly get that either at the October 5th. And then, of course, decide what you want to do with your October 12th meeting, if anything at all. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. I'll turn over to legislative services update. Ms. Rendell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have nothing to report.
Perfect. I'd just like to mention while we're on camera that September 20th is the deadline for nominations. So anybody that's tuning in at this point in the meeting is likely nominating, hoping to run for council. And with that, I'll look for a motion to go in closed session. Mayor Michaels?
I'll make that motion.
All those in favor? Thank you. I'll call a 7-minute break. 6:23.
We're allowed up to 10.
I feel like our